Welcome to the Joy Lab podcast, where we help you uncover and foster your most joyful self. Your hosts, Dr. Henry Emmons and Dr. Amy Prasek, bring you the ideal mix of soulful and scientifically sound tools to spark your joy, even when it feels dark. When you're ready to experiment with more joy, combine this podcast with the full Joy Lab program over at joylab.coach.
Hi everyone, Amy here. So Henry is going to discuss medications in this episode, and I really love that we're diving into this. I think it's so important because it can be easy to believe that you have to sort of choose a side when it comes to health. You're either in the alternative camp or the conventional camp. Now, my area of research is integrative modalities, specifically for mental health, and I can't tell you how many folks have said to me, "So I know you don't believe in medication. So I was wondering," and then they'll ask me a question. And then I'll say, "Hold up. Who said I don't believe in medication? I believe in science, and I believe that we also have so much power to create more healing than we think. That might mean a medication is needed for a lifetime. It might not." So our goal here at NMH and Joy Lab is for folks to not just feel better through evidence-based strategies, but to also step into that healing power that we all have and to really own that, to know that you can create healing. It may not mean something is cured in that clinical sense, but healing is always there. So listen in for this lesson with Henry as he gets into medications. He gives a really unique approach. And of course, remember, please, this content is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended to provide medical advice, and it is not a replacement for advice and treatment from a medical professional. Enjoy.
Let's talk a little bit about medication. One of our slogans is more skills, less pills, but I am not opposed to medication. I think there's a place for it. There's sometimes a need for it. It can be helpful. But in my view, we as a healthcare institution, we are medicating too quickly for too long a period of time for things that don't always need medication. The reason I say that is I think that many people who are diagnosed with depression actually have an adjustment disorder, which by definition is stress-related and temporary. And if people are given skills to be able to face whatever is stressful in their lives, the need for medication should be less. I also have a concern when people are put on a medication for a stress-related problem, and then they stay on it for such a long time that it becomes hard to get off of it. In my view, that takes about a year or 2 years. If people are on a medication for that long, you have to be very careful about how you come off of it, or the risk of withdrawal symptoms is clearly going to be there. So with that said, let me just talk a little bit about how I think about medication, its proper use, and how you might think about meds differently for those three subtypes of depression or mood problems. For the vast majority of people, the first medication they try is what's called an SSRI, or a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And that is probably the best choice for people with the anxious depression and even people who have more of that agitated mood state. In people with an anxious mood, in my view, the dose that is most effective is often a very low dose. So if it's something like Prozac or fluoxetine, the dose might be only 10 or 20 milligrams. If it's Zoloft or sertraline, it might be just 25 or 50 milligrams. And in my practice, I usually give that low dose at least 3 or 4 weeks, sometimes even a little bit longer, because it really can take, up to 6 or 8 weeks even for an SSRI to really start having its best impact. So point being, I don't think we should increase those medications too quickly in mild to moderate cases. If somebody has really severe depression, sometimes it does need to be done a little bit faster. Also, in my view, somebody who has a stress-related adjustment disorder, which usually shows up as an anxious mood, the length of treatment ought to be on the shorter side. Maybe it's only 3 to 6 months or 6 to 9 months, but I don't think it should be in a matter of years unless people have been given the opportunity to really learn some of the skills and still are having a lot of symptoms. So long-term use, it is appropriate, I think, for people with recurrent major depression or clinical depression. But for people, the vast majority of people where it's a temporary stress-related problem, I think we ought to be looking at a shorter course of treatment and then instituting some of these other things that are helpful. So for an anxious mood, kind of low dose SSRIs like Prozac, Lexapro, Zoloft, Celexa, or the generic names fluoxetine, Lexapro is S-citalopram, Zoloft is sertraline, and Celexa is called citalopram. Just the typical starting dose, and then cut that by half is how I usually do it. People who have more of that agitated mood state, this is where you really do have to be careful about starting an antidepressant that affects the serotonin system. As I said a little bit earlier, you can get too much serotonin. And if you do, you might feel that agitation heighten. And for some people, this is a risky time because your mood might still be bad. And then there's all this agitated, kind of edgy energy. And this is a time of risk for people who might have suicidal thinking. And sometimes people never have had it before, and they develop it when they first start an antidepressant. In my view, that's the greatest risk for people with that agitated mood state. I still might use medications, but I might start at a really low dose. So a quarter to a half of the usual starting dose, and giving it a little bit longer period of time and really watching closely in those first 2 to 3 weeks to be sure that there's not a worsening of mood. And then people with more of that sluggish mood might not do as well with a serotonin drug because they tend to be sedating. And a lot of times people need something that's more energizing. So the medications that might have more of an effect on the dopamine system are things like Wellbutrin, also known as bupropion. Again, a very appropriate choice for winter depression or people who are sluggish or sleeping too much or just can't get going or can't get off the couch or don't have any motivation. Medications that affect both serotonin and norepinephrine are things like Effexor, Cymbalta. Effexor is also called venlafaxine. Cymbalta is another what's called an SNRI, something that affects both of those neurotransmitters, and that might also be a good choice. Some of the newer drugs like Pristiq, Trintellix, those are also things that affect both of those, and so might be a good choice for somebody who needs a little bit more energy. In my practice, I will often add some of the natural therapies to try to boost energy or to try to help sleep. So just to summarize again, we do need to think about how to support brain chemistry in a person whose mood is really struggling, at least for a while, at least for a few months of feeling good. At that point, talk to your doctor about whether it's time and it feels appropriate to start reducing the medication. Maybe you could transition to one of the mood-supporting supplements, or at the very least get on some of those basic foundational supplements, which can also be so good for mood or energy or sleep and help as you're transitioning off medications. And then also could be really useful for you to try to prevent the depression from coming back in the future.
Thank you for listening to the Joy Lab podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, visit joylab.coach to learn more about the full Joy Lab program. Be sure to rate and review us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Please remember that this content is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended to provide medical advice and is not a replacement for advice and treatment from a medical professional. Please consult your doctor or other qualified health professional before beginning any diet change, supplement, or lifestyle program. Please see our terms for more information.